You had your show bill. Do you need your show bill? No?
I'll just pick random classes.
Okay. All right, so we were just going to kind of step through the setup. We all know how important the show setup is to your horse show. And if you don't know, then you should know. Lots of things can be changed along the way, but also it just makes it that much more time consuming to get it done. We just had this conversation with Doug Hulls the other day about combining classes is easy, pulling them apart is a lot harder. So when they went from 18 and under to 13 and under to 14 to 18, now you got to go back and double check who's in the right age class kind of thing.
And tie them all to the right NSBA class.
Yes.
And make sure they're all in the right high points. And yes.
Yeah, so setting up your show ahead of time is a key issue, or a key point. Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to
say we talked a little about the wizard, and you can go to your system preferences. If you go to add a new show and the wizard doesn't come up, you can always go back to your system preferences and check the little box that says automatically start the wizard. We're going to start. I'm just going to create a new show. It's going to be a split combined. You pick any number you want for your master show. I usually pick the first date of the show because then I can remember when it actually is. Your circuit points model, pick whichever one of those you need to. I'm just going to put in a show that I'm actually doing so you can see the process.
Oh, I had the dates right.
Good job.
I was typing yesterday when I was testing the other thing.
When you're creating multiple master shows and multiple subsidiaries, it's best to have a short label in here so you know which one's your first one, which one. Your two options are going to be add classes one at a time or copy all of the classes from another show. For this one, we're just going to add them one at a time because this show had too many changes from previous years to make it easy to do them.
Okay. So the short label is very, very important.
You stepped right over the short label there.
Oh.
The short label
go back.
is extremely important that you get correct when you set your show up. It helps differentiate between the two. You want to talk about the short label?
Yeah, because we went backwards here. Go ahead and start it again. So we can go back to the short label again just real quick. So the short label, when you have multiple slates of classes that are running, the short label is real helpful for several different areas. In Horse Show for Windows, you can see now the short label with the entries. Like when you pull up your back number and then you can see the list of entries. So you can see the short label listed on there as well. So it's kind of a good visual double check that this person is really in all 2 or 3 of the classes throughout your event, as opposed to they're only you've added them into one and you forgot the other one kind of thing. Or
so, does everyone know what the short label is? Let's talk. Your slate of classes, you have 2 slates, 1 and 2. It'll default the first slate to number 1, second slate is number 2, or it could be SC1 or SC2, or however you want to set that, label those up. Out at Sun Circuit, they use a whole bunch of different short labels.
Halter 1, Halter 2, Youth 1, Youth 2.
So it's all relevant, and it's very important for everybody in the showgrounds to know that they're on the right slate of classes. And it's important for the exhibitor. The exhibitor sees that in the tracker. It's all shown up on the tablet, so that it's a checkpoint for everybody on the grounds to make sure they're entering the data into the right place or reading the data from the right place. And if you get that wrong, it's not easy to change. So make sure you do it right up front.
Doable.
It's not easy to change the short label.
Well, once you push the show to the tracker, it is easy to change it before you get started with anything, the show, and you can change the short label like the same way as you can change a date in Horse Show for Windows. But once you push the show to the tracker and started taking online entries, it's tying all that information together to the events that are up in the tracker. So there's extra steps that you'd have to contact us, and there's extra steps that we'd have to take to modify the short label in the cloud so that it then connects with the right information into Horse Show for Windows on ongoing entries, as well as scratches, and again when we pull up the tablets and things later and fast announce, it's listed on there. So as Ray said, the gatekeeper can see it, the announcer can see it, the person who's keying in the entries in Horse Show for Windows can see it, and in the cloud they can see that they're entered into Show 1 and Show 2 kind of thing.
So that particular field is more for the tracker and all of
and
that.
tablets,
so
yes.
That's why I haven't had any.
It is more crucial for those kinds of things, but I would get into the habit now that it's there, because again, when you start doing entries, you can see that it shows up there as well. So when you are running classes or events with multiple slates of classes, again, the list of entries in your back number area will have that in parentheses next to it too. So it gives you kind of like an extra visual that you've got the horse entered in all days or all whatever's of that.
First half and the second half.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's one of the newer features in the last 4 years.
I've noticed it, but I never knew exactly.
Yeah, so that's what it's
The
utilized
importance of
for. And it as Ray said, it gives kind of everybody a global view of which show
It's
you're
the
doing.
key to the data.
Can I ask a really dumb question before you go to the next screen?
There are no dumb questions, so
Well-
just ask a question.
Where's the circuit points model? You've got the circuit words, and then you've got whatever the other option is. And I can't ever remember with those labels which one is which.
Okay, so the circuit points model is the one that's connected to the show overall, where Heidi just put in, like right up there at the top where it says circuit points model. The association points is what you're talking about, and when we go into the awards screen, we can talk a little bit more about those too. So the association points are in the background in the system. They're either one of two things. They're already hard coded to AQHA has a 9-point system for their all around. PHA has a 6-point system, I think, for their all around. Pinto has a different one. Ponies has 27,000 point models based on the kind of show that it is and the kind of, the day that you're running it. Sometimes it seems like, but those are kind of calculated in the background, or in the classes section, you can connect the points model to it, and that would be considered association points. And the circuit points model is what's connected to the show overall. So your circuit point model is applied to every single class in the show, irregardless of anything. Every single class that is in your show uses that points model. And then the association points is based on the approving association of the class itself and potentially other setup things that you've done in the classes area.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for asking too. So again, do you guys have anything? You guys were chatting anything for us that you were trying to get answered?
No,
You
it's
guys?
on fees or something.
We'll get there too. We'll get there too.
So when you add the classes, you then have the option here, if this is a payback class, you can go to the purse calculations and add, our entry fee is going to be $72 for this, and they're adding $1,000 to the cutting. And this is where you set up how much the added money and all of the payout information you want. For the mobile tools, the information down here is very important. You want to make sure that you put the correct dates in, because people are going to be looking online to enter your classes according to what date you have put in here. So if you put the first day of the show is just your default and you don't usually use that, with the mobile tools, you'll want to really pay attention to what date you're putting, because people are going to look at your show schedule and say, well, this one's on Thursday. Well, the date says Saturday. Oh, and then you're going to get a phone call. You don't need 10 million more phone calls.
Or we will get a phone call.
Right. So you want to make sure that the date is correct, and your locations. Your location is also very important as to off of your schedule. If you call this, you have different names for the arenas, you have different sponsors for the arenas. This particular arena is the EMO is the sponsor of this particular arena at this show. So we want to make sure that we put it in as the EMO main arena, or Hst Arena, or whoever your sponsors are. Or if you call it something else, your pavilion, your your Coliseum, whatever the location is where you put all of that information.
For the mobile tools, that's what gets sorted. Everything gets sorted by location and date. And Heidi's going to talk about the actual order in a second.
Correct. I actually will, if
You
you,
want your show bell? See, I knew you wanted your show bell.
it's in the backpack right down there, in the very back. It says sticking up with this. So off of just a typical show bill, and mine has color coding because I have 3 different slates of classes and I needed to know which was Judge 1, Judge 2. But your actual order is the actual order that the classes appear on your show bill. They don't necessarily correspond to the show bill number. You know, when you have more, you know, if you do the same exact schedule from day 1 to day 2, fine. If you don't, like we're doing cutting the first day, and then we're switching the order of the cutting classes the second day they do the class. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 the second day. Your actual order is going to be the actual order they run in, not necessarily your show bill number.
So it defaults to the show bill number, and then you can adjust it as needed.
And actual orders by date, the ordering, you can have the same actual order for 2 different classes as long as they're in a different location or on a different day.
Right. So what I usually do with my show bills is I just go down, and this is the first arena, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here's my second arena, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Next day, start again. And I just kind of handwrite a little thing on my show bills if they aren't in numerical order of show bill. Does that kind of make sense to everybody?
Yeah, what happens if you do that and then, I don't know, they add 3 classes in the middle of what you've done? Do you now have to go through and reorder, or
for the actual order, you do have to change that. You can add, instead of changing the whole thing, say between class 5 and class 6, they added 3, you can put your actual order would be 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. So you can kind of keep it in, you don't have to change everything for the whole day, but you do have to add the actual order to whatever you're adding. Does that make sense?
So what happens with in the fast announce, they'll use the location and the actual order to manage not putting too much noise to your team. You don't want your entire team to open up a tablet, see the entire show, and have to scroll every time they want to select the class. So the announcer actually manages this list. Once you set it up correctly, the announcer is in charge of managing what the scribes see to manage their day-to-day class. And the gate,
Not the announcer. The announcer doesn't usually.
well, they close it out and they clean up the list, right?
Sure.
So, and then the gate can see a day's worth of classes typically.
However many that you enable. We'll talk about that when we get to the mobile tools, but you can enable the entire show or just the day or just the location or 1 class at a time, depending upon if you're at a world show or Congress.
And this is where the online entries and all that stuff is tied together with just these 3 pieces of information.
And this Go information is now going to have lots more to do than it originally did years ago when you're using mobile tools or the patterns. For example, when we go to, you can put in your pattern number. If this was a class, pretend it's not cutting and this is the reining, we would put in the pattern number that we want to attach to the score sheet we are now going to print. This is where you put the information of what pattern it's going to be. It's also where you put your payout model. We're going to pay NSBA payouts for our cutting because we like that. But you want to make sure if you have something in the purse calculation that you also have something in the payout model. If you're paying the class out, you have to have a payout model here so it knows what to pay.
Wait, before you click enter, the other 2 boxes down at the bottom there, the HST Visible and the HST Score. These are newer boxes. HST Visible means that on the schedule in Horse Show Tracker, this class or this go is visible. So for instance, if you were running a first go, a second go, and a composite in an NRCHA, or you've created, I should say, a first go, a second go, and a composite for your NRCHA class, you don't want go 1 and go 2 and go C to all show up in the tracker on the same day in the same location because it's going to look like that class is triplicated basically. So on your first go or your final go, whichever you want to do, you can have the HST visible, and that's the default. And then on your second go, the one in between or the one that you don't need to make it duplicated, you're going to uncheck the box. That way, you only see that on the schedule one time. Entries are only ever done to go one, because as you guys know, you're not entering, if you guys have ever done any multiple goes, you're not entering anybody into it, you're qualifying them in all from go one. So anybody who's doing online entries is only ever going to see go one anyway, but when they go to find the draws or the results or something from it, they will go to and go see, and all the other goes are all listed, but when you tap into the class, then you see the multiple goes, as opposed to you don't want to see the class 3 times listed there.
Does that also work for warm-up classes? You don't necessarily need that on the horse show tracker. Correct. For anything, your grands and reserves, anything you don't necessarily want visible on the tracker that just takes up more space that they don't really need to see on there.
Some people utilize classes to handle all day fees or something like that, or and they enter everybody into a class to add the stall and the this and that, and then that kind of thing to get their all day fees to be the way they want them to be. So yes, those kinds of classes would not be something you'd want.
The World Show, we had a lot of jackpots that you didn't want to have visible. Was it
right.
Jackpots, right?
Jackpots,
right, because then it was too many classes. We had a class and a jackpot and an NSBA all held concurrently. You don't necessarily need to see 100% of that in your. Right. And then the scores.
And then the HST scores is, so for individually scored classes, a lot of you guys still, we'll talk a little bit about this later too, but a lot of you guys, I'm assuming, are still ranking everything and just keying in the rankings. Obviously, the trail is happening and they're being scored, but they're doing that on score sheets, and then they're handing you a judge card and you're keying in the back numbers. What we've been doing at many of the other shows now is we're actually physically keying in the score itself. And those get populated to the tracker. So people are able to see the leaderboard. They can see as each class happens, or as each entry happens, because the judges are keying, or the scribes are keying them into the tablets, they get pushed to the tracker as well. So AQHA in particular, that's where this one came from, is AQHA was happy to let that happen in their preliminaries for the classes, but when they got to the final 15, they did not want people to see who the leaderboard was. So that box is unchecked for their final go, and it is checked for their preliminary go. So it just kind of gives you some flexibility on what you want to display and what you don't. Some of the futurity classes,
99% of the time, you're going to leave them checked.
Right. That's why the default is to have them checked as opposed to the other way around.
It's helpful for your exhibitors too, who are looking on Horse Show Tracker. There's 52 in your trail class. They can tell, oh, well, there's scores for the first 30. I better get ready since I'm in the next class. It kind of gives them a representation of where the class is without having to either walk to the arena or come to the office and ask you questions.
That's what the tracker was originally designed to stop asking questions. Ray actually would walk around at Congress and he would hang out at the gate and listen to the questions that came into the gate. He would hang out in the office and listen to the questions that came out in the office. And that's literally where it was designed. What it was designed for was to start answering those questions. And it's grown dramatically since 2014 when we first put it out. But that's been the goal, is to make the office staff, because that was our first primary, our primary user is the office staff, to make the office staff's job easier. And it's grown for the gate staff. And
it was definitely an offshoot that people who start using the tracker start finding out that they enjoy these in-between time in the office rather than people interrupting them all the time. It really significantly 50-80% of the reduction. And if you're getting more questions that could be answered automatically because it's in the database, let us know, and that's going to be a new feature of the tracker. Because anytime you're getting a question that could be that you're looking it up in the system, then that's definitely something we can put in there.
We'll just quickly go through some of the other things. The drop high, drop low. If you're doing, like for the NSBA stuff, if you do, if you're taking a composite of all the judges, or if you're dropping one or the other, this is where you put in the information. Frozen paybacks, if you have, this is the payback, it's going to be this. That's all, you just click the frozen payback. The must place in held with, or must enter the held with. This is very helpful for the NSBA concurrent classes. If you do any dual approved or things that are held with each other, you can make sure that the secondary class is held with, they must enter the held with classes or must place in the held with. I don't know the
I was going to
must
say
place
that the
in.
must, well, yes, because in a scored class, and you tell it to place 15, so your AQHA has, 50 horses in it, and your NSBA only has 12. Well, your 12th horse in NSBA, if you tell it to place 15, but it didn't place in the 15 of the AQHA, it's still placing 15th. So, or 12th there, but that might have been the 50th horse on the AQHA card, and they don't get points that way. I mean, they don't. If you didn't place on the card in the AQHA card, so when you're telling the AQHA class to place 9 or 15 or however many, based on the side of your class, and your last NSBA of the 9th or the 10th or the 12th there wasn't technically one of those, then they shouldn't be placed at all. And in a scored class, everybody gets a score. So it's in a ranked class, it's easy. They weren't on a card, they don't get a place. But in a scored class, they will technically get a place. So you just got to be careful. I will say that the must enter in held with, while it does work for online entries, it does not yet in horse shopper windows. So it won't kick you a message that says, hey, they haven't entered the AQHA portion or the dual approved portion yet.
Okay. Any questions or anything else on this portion?
Go.
Do I have more classes? Of course. We've got 10 million of them. I want to continue adding without the wizard coming back to ask me every time I'm adding classes. So I'm going to check the little box that says I'm just going to add a few more classes. Our next class is going to be, we start with the trail the next day. If you have sponsors, does the sponsor logo, is that AQHA World Show specific?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So,
if you have sponsors that you want to print on some of your draw sheets or results, you would put in your sponsor information here. The trail at this show, we're unfortunately not adding any money to because we don't like the trail as well, apparently.
if you just add the sponsor itself, like if EMO is sponsoring this particular class, that will print on the announcer sheets as the name. The logo is a separate thing. Yes.
Okay. Again, this one is going to be, we're having this one in the Coliseum, not the EMO main arena. Because the show bill number is 2, its actual order is 2, but it's actually on a different day. So I can change my actual order to match whatever I need it to be on my show bill. We haven't set up any patterns or anything yet, so I'm not putting any of those. And there's no paybacks for this one, so nope, I don't have any more classes to enter.
Do you want to add one more for NSBA approved in that and talk
Oh,
about
sure.
the held with field? Yeah, when we finish this, we'll go back to the class logos.
Ann Webb, do you know any of the class codes for NSBA off the top of your head?
You want Junior Trail?
Sure. It was. That was Hunter Under Saddle, but
Oh, okay. I thought you said, oh.
no, I was picking random numbers.
Okay.
If you go to show information on that screen, pick
Any of the shows here?
show me the money.
Yeah.
And then
What
scroll
class are you
down because
looking
it'll
for?
be for something.
I don't think she cares.
What class are you looking for?
Here, do amateur
Junior
trail.
trail.
2, 3, oh, junior trail? 230301.
There. Now we'll pick the correct class to be held with the correct thing.
Go.
So the NSBA Junior Trail, we changed our approving association to NSBA. There's no paybacks in this one. You do have to change the date to be the correct date. It doesn't automatically change that.
That's correct, because you don't know yet that it's held with the other one, because you haven't told it yet.
If I don't change the location or the actual order, once I hold it with it,
It should
Yes.
change it, yes.
and I want to hold it with my AQHA and watch the screen, see how it says NSBA Junior Trail. When you hold it with the AQHA Junior Trail, it comes up with the correct. If you accidentally pick the wrong class that isn't an actual class, it'll come up and tell you that's not a real class number. And it reverted back to the NSBA held with because it didn't have a valid class to hold with it. So if you just leave it this way, it's not going to be held correctly because it has now reverted back to my NSBA. So let's go back to AQHA, put the correct class code, and then must enter and must place in the held with. Can I skip through these, or do you need to say anything about these?
You can't
we can add
judges through there, so it'll tell you that. You can't,
yes. So. And then you can add your subsidiary shows. I'm not going to do that now just because I don't know any of the numbers of the subsidiary. Well, I do. It's 912054, but not adding those now. I want to exit because I'm all done. If you want to look at the information, when you go back into the junior trail, it has now changed the location and the actual order because it now has something that it is held with. The date itself, you'll have to change though.
I believe so, yeah.
You'd want to make sure that the date, so then if you have this visible, you want to make sure that you just double check that the dates are correct. Any questions about the Go information and how to set them up for the tablets, tracker, online entries? Okay.
So going back to I'm just looking at the notes that we put in on that, under that area too. The held with classes are the only ones that are visible on the tablets and in Fast Announce, and so that when your gate people and your judges and your announcers are looking for the class, they're not finding the AQHA class and the NSBA class. They are finding the AQHA class and within it, and we'll pull one up later when we get to that point. But you'll be able to see that when they pull that one up, you'll have different tabs for each of the classes that are running concurrently. So whether that's an AQHA and an NSBA, or an L1 and an L2 and an NSBA L2 and an NSBA L3, not L1 and L2, but L2 and L3, that kind of thing. So all of the classes are available for the announcer to announce from or for, but your gatekeeper just sees one big list. Your judges, scribes just see one big list of all the horses that are entered.
So what about like a level 1 class and a rookie?
Same thing. Same thing. They're only shown up once because they show up in the arena only one time, but they show up in one big list. So when you do L1 and rookie together, you get one draw, or if they're drawing, or if it's a pleasure class and they're all going out there. But then the judges, as they enter their results, or the gate people as they're checking them in, only have one list basically of everything. And then the system splits them out as a regular concurrent class. The system splits them out based on which class they were entered in, one, the other, or both, and places them accordingly. In the case of the tablet, same kind of thing. They just see the entire list of it. In the L2, L3 classes, there's actually parentheses around the L2 horses, so that when you're having your scribes, fill out, or the judges, whoever's doing that part, fill out their judge cards, they can see which ones are the L2 horses. So they fill out in the other show. Yeah, when we get there to the Clover.
Well, and I just added an L2 and L3 amateur trail so they can see. And for the level 2 amateur, I want to change my held with and hold it with my level 3 class. So then they're tied together. If we, enter a couple dummy people in there, then you can see that on there. Then right. Which one's in the level 2 and which one's in the level 3.
With respect to the leveling, this is one thing that I think people avoid doing leveling because they're afraid of it. But Funware does a really good job of managing leveling. At the larger shows, they can do it for your smaller shows too. If you want to have a level class, the software will literally hold your hand through the whole process. And the judges, they don't know. A lot of them, I don't know, they used to be there, they don't know it, but now they just trust the software to tell them how to mark their cards out.
Well, and that's the level 1 in rookie, like in Denver, is always an issue because without tablets, it's very difficult. You have to then print a piece of paper to the scribes and ring stewards that says, here's the people in your level 1 class, here's the people in your rookie class. When people add at the gate, they don't necessarily know, are they being added to this section or this section? And it's always, the tablets make that a much easier process with the concurrent rookie and level 1 classes, especially since there's so much changing of those.
Now, just to continue that conversation, when you're using a tablet and they're dealing with the main held with class at the gate, you cannot add to the concurrent class at the gate. You have to go back to the office to do that, which doesn't happen that often, but when it does, you do it.
So if they need to be NSBA, the gate people would tell them that they have to contact the office to get into those NSBA classes. And ironically, it was not by design, but AQHA does have that rule as well, that if you enter at the gate into an L2, L3 class that's running concurrently, you cannot enter into L2, regardless of if you're eligible for L2. So ironically, it was a happenstance, a happy happenstance. And NSBA, similar kind of thing, is not everybody has a card, not everybody is eligible, not everybody is blah, blah, blah. And this kind of, they've already double checked in the office that they are, have an NSBA valid membership and that kind of thing.
And while we're at it, just to skip ahead a little bit, this is by design, we haven't fixed that because it just makes the gate's life more complicated. They have enough things to work on. It's easier for them to say for that situation, add that side person than making the screen more complex to use. Simplicity of use of the screen is key for us. So we don't like to complicate that
screen
experience more than we have to.
Okay, we're going to go over a little bit of the abbreviations of your classes. I'm just going to pick those classes that we have put in here. Maybe. These abbreviations make your life much easier when you are printing gate sheets with concurrent classes. You want to know if the person's in the level 3 or the level 2. If you don't put anything in this abbreviation field, it's just going to come up with the AQHA class code or whichever association's class code in there. And most times people don't know what those codes are, so it doesn't make sense. But when you print your gate sheets, if you have abbreviations in here, it will show up online on the tracker as well as on all of your gate sheets, draws, any of those things to make sure you have all of your people, for the level 2, level 3, for example. If you put your draw sheets up and you notice that somebody's entered in level 2 and level 3, you can then address that before it gets to the arena.
The exhibitor can see it too. When you push your draws to the tracker, it shows them the abbreviation of the classes that they're in. So if they're and supposed to be in the NSBA and they don't see that, but they see it on 3 other entries, then they'll be calling the office and saying, hey, I meant to be in, NSBA too. So it, again, this goes back to a lot of the questions and a lot of the things that happen in the show office. We're trying to help alleviate that by letting the exhibitor see as much as possible up front. So that
the announcer also uses the abbreviations very heavily.
Right, Fast Announce shows the abbreviations as well, and so that's been very helpful for checkout and closeout of
And those are automatically in there.
The L1, L2, L3 are automatically in there. I think NSBA is probably automatically in there. But if you're adding new classes, or if you have all breed classes, or your local association
or
classes,
jackpot classes,
things like that, anything that you guys are adding, obviously it won't have anything in there. Right. So the more that you guys can include those things, the better it is for both you guys in the office part. All your staff as far as the tablets and tracker or announcer, Fast Announce, and then of course all your exhibitors. And that it kind of all, it's a little bit extra work for you guys to start out with, but it kind of all trickles down.
Once it's done, it's done.
Yeah,
right.
And it doesn't, it doesn't get overwritten if we do a download.
No, it does not. It does not. We don't. Actually, that's a good question that you bring up, Ann. There's about 5 or 6 fields in the class definition that we do not touch because we think if you guys have gone in there and made that change, we're not going to mess with it. Abbreviation is one of them.
Disciplines, I think.
Discipline, probably, right? Yeah.
It does not override that because if you have created your own class, say you have an all-breed class or a jackpot class, it will ask you for the discipline, and that's also tied to the maneuver scoring, the pattern score sheets. The discipline is very important to have in there. But if you are creating classes, you need to make sure to put it in. But if it's something you have already changed, the updates do not override that. It's not going to
change that, right? The type of draw that it is, whether you're drawing or, whether this is a drawn class or a split class, I don't think we changed that either. Points model obviously is not something we changed because that's not a figured in there. Try to see if there's anything else specific in there. Check relationship and payee, I think. social security number required, so there's a handful of things definitely in there that we're not going to change. The ones that we are going to change are like the code itself, if it changes, well, obviously we're adding new codes. The names, I think we change because the associations themselves are supposedly coming up with those names. And so we've adjusted those. Categories we change because as AQHA just changed branch writing from one category to another, so that kind of thing. The division, a lot of the restrictions that are very specific to this class are we will override. I think that's probably most of it. Exclusion from classes. Yeah, so Heidi started tapping in a little bit to the discipline. It's also used on the tracker to sort. So if they just care about the halter classes, they're only, they're a halter person, they're coming in on halter. When you go into tracker and you look at the list of classes, you can do it by day, but if you don't know the day and you just care about halter, you can scroll through the list of disciplines and it goes in there. I feel like there's one more thing on discipline. When we enable classes, you can filter by discipline so that you can, if you're enabling a group of classes. So there's a handful of places where discipline, the scoring method, and again, Heidi tapped on the location and the dates already that are helpful as we move into utilizing Horsesurfer Windows and the tablets and the tracker.
Anything else with the
scoring method? So we touched a little bit on the fact that 90% of you guys, if not all of you, are basically every class is ranked. So if you are wanting to switch over and start using the maneuver scoring that we'll talk about later that's on the tablets, or even just regular scoring, just keying in the final score, you would change the scoring method from ranked to scored. And the way that this works as well is if you go ahead and click OK, you get the option of, this is where kind of the discipline comes in, where you get the option to change them all so that you don't have to go into every single trail class that you're holding, NSBA or AQHA or whatever, and change it from ranked to scored. You can just change every class that is trail to scored.
So as you get more comfortable with the tablets, you're going to say, I want to do more and more tablet work. You're going to go to scored, set them all up to scored.
Trail, Western riding, range riding, whatever, whichever classes that you're wanting to
Your battery is running low.
Apparently I'm not plugged in either.
Where's your?
Well, I didn't actually plug it in. It's in the bag under the table. That's what happens when, see, I guess the battery does work for a while. That's a couple hours.
That's a record.
I think that is a record for me. Might have, nope, it did. It did.
Perfect.
Yep, very good. Thank you. Scoring method, retouch on all those. Discipline, scoring method. Oh, the approving associations required for entry. So for the 90% of your classes, down at the bottom right-hand corner, where you have the required numbers, in this case, the horse is required to have an AQHA number, and the exhibitor is required to have an AQHA number. AQHA keeps saying that eventually they were going to have, like every other association, is going to have the owner that's going to be required to have it. So we'll update those when that happens. But when you're creating your own new classes too, you can have it require specific associations. Also in the tracker, when you have those things, so like if you set up futurity classes and they have to be NSBA required, you can have that in there. And when that pushes up to the tracker, then as they do online entries, it will require that number to be input. We can't say that they're valid all the time, but they would have to at least put it in.
Question on the scoring. So if you're doing a futurity class or something with 3 judges and it's like trail, where it's scored because there's only 1 judge usually, when you do 3 judges and you have scored, is it going to average? Is it going to go by the scores, or is it going to go by how the judge placed them?
If you have it set up to be scored, it's going to go by how they scored.
It'll place them as the scoring. So if they've got a 78 and a 70, that's 1, 2.
But the scoring,
Saying like AQHA, if you're doing an AQHA class, it still has them placed by each, by the score. If you're doing a futurity,
but even in a futurity, wouldn't their score translate to a placing if their scores are 75, 73, and 72? It would be first, second, and third.
The situation like the NSBA world, it's not always how the score is because they go back and place them after the score. Which,
For which kind of class?
like the NSBA world,
Right.
the tracker doesn't always match what the placings are for the world show because they have the scores there, but then they go back and place them as the judge.
You would have scored then a placed class, so they do it.
So what they do, and what I think that they're going to do this year coming forward, is they, at AQHA Worlds, they put the scores in for Go 1, and then when they move to, for the classes that they want them to be scored first and then ranked later, then we do a Go 1, and then we do a final Go, and everybody gets qualified, or the top X get qualified into the next Go. There's a way of changing the scoring method for Go 2 or Go F or whatever the next Go it would be to ranked. And then the scribes put in the placings, and then at that point, that final Go is based on a rank versus on a score.
We should add that to the list. That's a good one. Qualifications, we're doing Go 1, Go 2 qualification scores and rank. That's going to be happening more.
Because you know, a judge could be a point or two different than the other one, but if that's the higher, you know, we can change. Doesn't happen a lot, but it can.
It does happen. We've seen it happen.
Yeah. And that's why, so you get the ability to do it either way, basically. So again, that's where we, at the AQHA World Show, they do the first Go 1 is scored, and they put in all the scores, and then they set up a second Go or a final Go. They qualify, say, the top 15 in there, and then and they change it to ranking. The scribes would change, or would key in the placings, if you will, at that point, and then it becomes placed. That those final 15 become placed versus scored.
And that procedure works really well for the horsemanship, showmanship, equitation, where they get a score and then the top ranking come back on the rail, and then it's a placed class at the end. So that's when you would use the change from scores to ranking.
Right. Yep.
You guys do multiple goes? You guys do multiple goes or scores and rank? You do that? So we should go through a full example of that.
Okay, we can talk about that one. All right. Okay, so I think we went through the classes and shows and stuff. Let's go ahead and stop this, and then we'll swap and go into the entries and results. Well, you should leave.
You did that.